Welcome back, everybody, to FamilyTech. I have the honor to introduce Stacey Higginbotham, who has been following the Internet of Things. She says she's the Methuselah of the Internet of Things. At least following it. Thank you, Stacey, for joining us. Stacey has a podcast, if you're interested in IoT, which I'm sure you are because you're here, where you can learn from her. And she said, and if you don't prefer podcasts, she actually has a website. Stacey on IoT? Perfect. Stacey, you want to come to the stage and introduce your panelist? You're good. You're good.
Okay. Come on up, panelists. I'm actually going to have them introduce themselves, or I can just blow through them as they walk up. But
you know how to do this, Stacey.
I'm like, this is a little interesting intro here. So this is Felicity.
Hello, Felicity with STRATIS IoT.
Maya.
Hello.
From Techstars. Dan from Comcast. Philip from Beta. Did we have? That's it.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, so this is basically how do you get to the smart home? Because how many people in this audience feel that they have products that make their home smart? Hand raise. Okay, so a lot of you. And those who don't have it, maybe after this moment today, you'll be like, yes, this is how. So there are certain times in your life when you are like, holy cow, I need more than what I have. And those tend to be when you move into a new house, when you have a baby, and for aging in place. And so we're going to kind of break down some of these concepts and maybe even add to them because these guys are a lot smarter than I am. So when people come into the Beta store, what are they looking for from a smart home perspective? Do you see any commonalities around stages of life?
Yeah, we see a lot of interest based off of stages of life, but also like occurrences. So for example, if there's a rash of maybe break-ins in a neighborhood, all of a sudden people are like, oh, there's a couple homes, on my block, experienced with some vandalism or something like that. Do you guys have, security cameras or IP cameras or types of things? So you see that kind of type of thing happening, but also stages of life as well of, around, again, I've got a new, like my business partner just had a baby, and his outfitted the whole house with like the connected crib and the IP camera and baby monitors and all of those kind of things. And so you definitely see that a lot, and really is kind of the driving factor of kind of how we then kind of deal with it from a customer service standpoint.
And Dan, with your audience is huge. Is it 20 million households?
So 25 million internet households.
25 million internet households, massive difference in types of people. So what do you see when your customers start inquiring about the smart home? Where are they?
Sure. So a little bit of context. So we've got, if you think of Comcast Smart Home, Comcast Xfinity Home, you could think of it as 3 services generally. One is home security. We have about 1.3-ish million home security customers, growing fairly well. Fastest growing home security company in our footprint.
Faster.
We have 24/7 video recording, and we have the most important part, which just announced today, which was giving away automation to all our internet subs. So 15 million plus customers now have home automation hub from Comcast. I think as you look, the transition stages you've articulated, which is moving into a new home. The number one purchase there is home security. It's the most common time somebody buys home security, other than when people are concerned about sort of neighborhood crime, is when you move into a new home or first time you move into a new home, et cetera. New baby, it's often camera and 24/7 video recording and all the baby accessories now with socks and weighing, changing tables and specialty cameras that are measuring temperature and whether or not the baby is turned over on their stomach or back, and all sorts of really cool things there. And then teenager, it comes back. Frankly, the camera tends to transform into a different use case. Like, did my kids get home and bring 17 of their friends with them for a party? And then aging in place, I think is a well-established category historically. But it really hasn't innovated at the same pace as the rest of the smart home. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to help the aging population. So they're looking for sleep, bathroom usage, food, activity monitoring, et cetera. So we're seeing all that.
And we'll dig into that a little bit because I think it's an interesting case, but there's a lot of barriers there. So Maya, you invest in companies, and I would say it feels like we're moving in the smart home area out of devices into real problems, like how do we get these to work together? And so what are you seeing as people are encountering the smart home? Where are the things where you're like, ooh, we totally still need to work on this? What's exciting from that perspective?
It's a great question. I think we're beginning to see sort of an inflection point when it comes to connected devices where it's no longer a vertical, right? In the same sense that technology is no longer a vertical. It used to be a vertical, or it used to be thought of that way about 10, 15 years ago. But now it's every part of our life. And we expect every part of our life to be connected at some point. So, it started with maybe a few years ago. You had a Nest, and you put that in you're like, oh, I can control the temperature in my home through my mobile device. For instance, I was in New Zealand last week, and I realized that we were having this crazy cold situation in New York, and it was below zero. It was like 100 below zero at one point with the wind chill. I was like, we should probably turn on the heat. So it has the potential to solve problems in your life where I don't think of it necessarily as its own sort of category. It's really going to end up touching everything. So that's changed when it comes to our investment thesis. We have definitely categories we're more interested than others. I think wellness is an amazing category that people are already very interested in, and that a connected device can fix issues that you can't fix with any other. And then when it comes to software is really the key here, right? You can have a lot of different products that say that they're connected, but if you don't have the right product backing it up digitally, what are you doing with that data? People are very concerned about their privacy, what it's being really used for, 3, the use case, right? It's really, your product is really only as interesting as the software that backs it. Mm-hmm. So that's a great question.
And we'll talk about privacy stuff.
One point, sorry, on the vertical piece, when I was at Nest, that was the thing. When we first launched, like the thermostat and the products, people didn't understand, a lot of companies and a lot of even retailers were trying to create this whole, hey, you gotta have this whole connected home, and people are like, what the hell is a connected device? They didn't even know what that singular device. So I think what happens is you are starting to see that now, is that once people, it's become a little bit more mainstream, and it's kind of crossed that chasm. So now you can start having that conversation of how the products work together, because originally, 3-4 years ago, people didn't even understand what or how one of those devices could affect them. And I think as they're starting to have more, and once you get one, there's the propensity, they say, to have anywhere between 6 to 10 connected devices in your home.
I'm like, 45?
Your average.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of dig into some of these use cases. And Felicity, you actually brought up a good one that I didn't think about, but college, and this also fits into first homes. You do MDUs, so apartment buildings, that kind of thing. So let's talk about how we actually get the smart home into these different categories. So how are you guys kind of doing that, and how do college students?
Yeah, so millennials are kind of an obvious driver of adoption of some of these technologies, certainly driving the demand in apartment buildings and student housing as well. And I think that the new experience in student housing is far more resort-like than anything I ever experienced in college. As a matter of fact, I am fairly certain I would not graduate today. Why would you? So the student housing is driving adoption of these smart technologies fairly heartily. And
what are they excited? What do they get? What are they interested in?
Well, when you think about student housing turns, the term is turns twice a year. All of the students move out and a whole new group of students move in. And when you track the liabilities of the security of that circumstance, that hard key can be lost relatively easily. And smart credentials can be much more easily managed. The energy costs for student housing are still largely on the owner of the property as opposed to students. Students don't necessarily have a lot of incentive to save energy costs. I know I certainly didn't, that wasn't front of mind my freshman year. And so we're seeing these efficiencies, capabilities increased through these technologies. But then those millennials take that expectation of the smart door lock and the smart thermostat and lighting devices even to their apartment experience. And so we're now seeing that demand carry over into multifamily, which is apartments.
And I'll throw this open to anybody, because it used to be when you bought your first real home, like an actual home or condo, I don't know, security was the big deal because you just spent a lot of money on this thing. Now, when you're coming in from having smart lighting or a smart thermostat, does that change what happens and what you buy in your first home?
I mean, I think nothing really is, we see a pace for replacing security as the sort of primary purchase. Mostly because I think the cycle is just starting. I think your premises will be valid as we move forward 3-4 years, because I think people are experiencing a lot of these capabilities today. After security, let's just break down security though. I think security is call the police, call the fire department, call the ambulance. That's sort of like life safety. But there's also this other aspect which has more to do with peace of mind and more to do with, is my door locked? Is my garage door closed? Did I turn all the lights off? Is my dog on the couch? It's more about an emotional connection to the home and peace of mind that things are going well when I'm not there, which is a little bit sort of separated, but in the same general category. I think doorbells are in that category as well. So I think there's a whole portfolio of, and even lighting could be in that category, like, make the house look like I'm home when I'm not there, make sure I'm not consuming energy, turn all the lights off unnecessarily, et cetera. But we're not seeing that pull through, that like sort of, I had all this connected stuff here, when I come to my new home, I really want all this connected stuff there. It's more of discovery for the first time.
Okay.
Well, I think, we see too, a lot of people come in, again, in San Francisco, we see this a lot, but I mean, with Airbnb and now, people come in all the time saying, I need a solution because I'm not, I rent my house out all the time. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing where, again, it's not even just about, it's again, having access, granting access, it's having that security, as you mentioned, controlling the temperature and the efficiencies, because you don't, somebody who comes in for 2 or 3 days isn't going to care, and they're going to jack it up, and or the heat or the AC. And so those are things, again, that we're even kind of starting to see. A lot of people come in, probably one of our number one use cases around shopping for connected home products.
Okay. Are the Airbnb people putting cameras in?
Not that I'm aware of. Outside, externally.
Okay. This is a concern of mine.
That's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Adjust your travel plans.
Let's bring actually cameras as a good place to start, because with children, like baby monitors, and even the issue of aging in place, we've danced around this issue of privacy and kind of expectations around that. So as an industry, as we start making homes smarter and we put vulnerable population, they're not necessarily vulnerable, but maybe they're privacy focused, or kids are vulnerable. How should we start pushing the industry on the privacy and data issue? That's a big question. So you guys just go right at it.
I feel like it's something that we all need to be thinking about. That the industry needs to be thinking about, the people who are creating the products, but also the users are going to have to be just as informed. We've seen this happen many times, right? When this is before I was born, but people were really concerned about credit cards back in whenever this was the 70s, because credit cards attach a lot of your personal data to them. And so instead of using cash, which was like the most anonymous form of buying and selling things until, of course, Bitcoin came along, the idea of attaching your personal data to something that then you could buy with, in many people's minds outweighed the benefits. But of course, history told us that the benefits of using the credit card outweighed the privacy concerns. So really, we're going to be doing, with every big tech innovation that really permeates our lives, and I believe that this is one of them, we're going to all be coming into this with open eyes. Creators, I would like to think that users would be informed enough where the best products on the market that also protect their privacy, or at least allow you to be aware of how that data is going to be used. Those are the products that are going to win out, because those are the products that are also going to just be more mindful of the consumer and their needs. That being said, it's kind of a wild west right now, right? So there's a lot of It's great to have blogs like yours up. It's great to have other sources of information. People need to be aware of what the data that is being pulled from the devices and how it's being used, and companies need to have the responsibility to tell their users.
How are you guys seeing that? Like, is that even a concern of people in college?
Absolutely.
Like, how do you guys or your property owners handle that?
Yeah, so multifamily, the property owner is not responsible for just their own house. That property owner is responsible for 300 units and liable for 300 units. So privacy, security are of the utmost importance. I was on a panel the other day and somebody asked regarding security and along the lines of privacy and security, what if you get hacked? And the product maker said, perhaps they would be able to tell your thermostat. Is that really a big deal?
Oh.
I almost died on the panel. It is a big deal. It's a multi-billion-dollar big deal to Target, who experienced a breach in their HVAC system. So it's of the utmost concern to property owners who are making decisions across 300 homes at a time. And if it's not front of mind, to your point, that product won't stay in the market long, whether it's an ecosystem or an individual device. It just doesn't have the capacity with the demand that consumers rightfully put into the market.
And outside of the U.S. too, I mean, a lot of, especially in Europe, I mean, it's heavily regulated. I mean, there's a lot of, especially in France, you can't even, I mean, when we were launching Nest into Europe, I mean, there were a lot of times that we can't even have, like, there's a lot of laws that just hang exterior cameras on your property of what you can capture upon your lease line, because it's an invasion of somebody's privacy if they drove by your house and things like that. And so a lot of countries are taking it very serious, and I think you're going to start to see probably, to your point, it's a Wild West, and I think you'll start to see some regulations probably around some of those things at some point in time as well.
Okay. Let's talk about aging in place specifically, because that feels like when I'm away from home, I love checking in on my family just to make sure, it just feels good, right? So if I have a parent or someone, so how do you bring technology to a group of people who may be distrusting privacy stuff or may not be tech savvy?
I think that, so I have a personal story. My grandmother recently was admitted to the hospital with a UTI, urinary tract infection. And so it was quite serious. She had gone 6-7 weeks and went undetected because she couldn't really communicate. You ask her how you're feeling, everything hurts. You can't really you can't really discern that she's not feeling well or she has a slight fever. So after weeks of antibiotics, I went to the doctor. I'm like, how could we have prevented this? He says, it's quite simple. If you just knew the number of times she went to the bathroom and you knew that trended up, that's a leading indicator, and you would take her to the doctor and she would have taken over-the-counter medication. So I think it's very easy. You just put a flush sensor, you put a motion sensor in the bathroom.
I don't know if I want people knowing how often I go to the bathroom.
It sounds, so maybe, but for an aging population that can't communicate their ails and needs, I think it's, sort of the benefits outweigh the concern in a material way, to know whether or not somebody's sleeping, to know their heart rate when they're sleeping, to know whether or not they've opened the fridge, to know whether they've moved off the couch. These are sort of, when you're talking about, my grandmother's 94, so when you're talking about that population, I think it's enormously powerful. And I think,
have you put the sensors on her door yet? Does she know about them?
Stacey, I got my dad an Echo.
You're killing me, Stacey.
I got my dad the Echo Show. My dad is in Oklahoma. I'm in Philadelphia. And my husband sometimes works from home. So I don't know how my dad figured this out.
Do you know how many times your husband goes to the bathroom?
No, but my husband's on a work call in the office, which is where our Echo Show is, and my dad drops in, which is a feature on Echo Show. Drops into the office and is like, my dad's from Oklahoma. Well, hey, Sean, how you doing? And my husband's like, I dropped in on my dad, and there was hell to pay. Privacy, my dad doesn't want me dropping into his house on a Friday night.
So that begs the question, how do you introduce this to people with maybe their consent or knowledge, and
Yes.
or just convince them? I mean, I think you're right. It is a good use case, but You weren't selling it to me, and I bet you didn't sell it to your
Well, I mean, like I said, I think the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. I think that explaining it to my grandmother, who, barely speaks English, and understanding what the technology will do for her, explaining to her it's a medical device, I think, is enough for her to sort of accept what's going on. So I think she's just went through an experience that she'll take anything that'll help her.
It comes down to simplicity in the use case, and often I find that when we're talking to consumers that come into the store, it's figuring out. You have to find out what's truly the need and the purpose behind this. And then from there, it's letting them know the value kind of equation of that and what the intent is. And so as Dan was saying, the intent here is not to be creepy and to understand that. The intent is to keep you safe and to do these types of things. And if you can get that understanding, and maybe it's not starting in the bathroom, maybe it's starting, with your thermostat to say, we can control the temperature in your house and to understand but there's different things. And I think once people become a little bit more comfortable with it, you can ease them into it. And I think especially, even with my parents, first they had an S thermostat, now they've got a Ring doorbell. And literally it just continues to manifest, and they're not techie people at all, but now I'm finding that their house is becoming outfitted because they feel comfortable with one item, and it's starting there, and then you can start to kind of.
If you're talking about aging in place, the definition of aging in place is extending the time an elderly individual or couple can stay in their home versus moving into assisted living community. So if it's explained in that way, it's look, it's not safe at home. You have two choices. We can sort of do things to help you keep you safe in your home, and you can continue to live at home, or you can move into a facility that has people that can help you. And so I think it's if people are choosing to sort of stay longer in their household versus moving into a community, and they need tools to enable them to do that in a safe and healthy way.
And we're doing that actually in assisted living now. Once you've actually gone from your house, there are varying degrees of assistance in many of these spaces. And so to allow a resident to stay in the, frankly, less expensive, less disruptive, less intrusive space longer, even there is a benefit. And it's more obviously realized there than I think in the single family home. But
Okay, we're gonna take audience questions in a minute, but I'm gonna broach another controversial family topic here. When do you get rid of, or do you get rid of cameras in your kids' rooms? A lot of these smart baby monitors, at what point in time do you take those? When do you stop monitoring them?
did anybody see the Black Mirror episode? Yeah, it's a good one. So I just missed it with my 3 kids. We never had any baby monitors that worked, first of all, and then they just they were close enough that we just didn't. But I think it's a tremendous opportunity to overreach.
Yeah, I have 2 young kids, and when my son was a baby, we were launching, we were talking about Nest Cam kind of coming to Europe, and I had a story where I was telling the guy, said, look, I can keep an eye on my son and watch him in his room, and the guy's like, and he looks at me, and I'm like, he's 18 months. He's like, oh, I thought he was 10 years old. I'm like, no, but it's definitely top of mind. But yeah, my kids used to love it because it has a 2-way microphone, and I'd talk to them, and then they would yell back at it, and then I realized I actually wanted it out, because then they actually were being more annoying doing it anyway, and so they kind of are gonna.
So once
they're
the
gonna
kids
tell
get more
you,
annoying,
yeah,
that's when the
exactly. That's when you yank it out. When you actually don't want to know what's going on in there, and you're like. Eh.
All right, questions from the audience? Wave your hands big, there's lights in my face. Okay, I'll keep going. Okay. Other things about families. So we've talked about cameras and sensors. Are there fun use cases? I always like to explore what people are doing that help bring the families closer together. And I think that's...
Yeah. So this is something that I just started experiencing with. My son is 13. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But every day, we'll be hanging out somewhere in the house, and we tricked out our house big time with echoes. Every single room, every bathroom, everywhere. We got them for the holiday, it's ridiculous. But every single day, he introduces me to a new piece of music. He's like, oh, Mom, did you hear the song Broccoli? Yeah. And I'm like, dude, yeah, okay. But he's sharing with me proactively And I think music has the capacity to do that. I think that's why we're seeing such a heavy drive in speakers. And to me, that's such an opportunity to connect on just a very deep level with another human, whether it's older, younger, et cetera. So
I completely agree. I think media is a great play in IoT. I think, right now our biggest pain point is we're always staring at our phones. And IoT has the capability of pulling us out of our phones. And so, just as beautiful it is when you're interacting with a family and then you're like, oh, I want to show you this video, except you're always locked on this tiny screen, the ability to do that with your Alexa, the ability to talk to your furniture and have it work with you and have it bring it, what it does is it allows us to really interact on a more human level versus us talking to technology, talking to human. And just as a plug for Techstars, we're super interested in investing in cool, new, fun products that are leveraging IoT, and our applications just opened a couple of days ago. So you have until April 8th if you or anybody you know is working on something cool.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of the digital picture frame and the digital canvas and the reemergence of that, because everything's cloud-based, right? You remember it was a thing, but you had the SD card and it was really annoying. But now you can push pictures and content to people, and we see that all the time. Whether it's mural or Depict that have large canvas type of things where you can constantly change the artwork, or even if it's just pushing pictures of family or whatever, things like that, especially to even aging population, where instead of texting it to somebody, you can literally upload it to an Aura frame or Joy or something like that immediately. I think you see a lot of those use cases, as well as even, you look at Nintendo, right? The original Wii and the Switch, these are very interactive type of gaming systems that bring the whole kind of family together that are fun. That are different than kind of an individual type of system.
So when you do this, who is tech support? I feel like there's a big hole in the market for, we have a digital picture frame we gave to my mother-in-law and my mom, and they like it, except sometimes things happen. And they reboot it, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So as we turn these homes smart for people, how do you solve that problem? Or is it on me as the IT manager of my home?
well,
I think Comcast is sort of well positioned there. We support, I don't know about the picture frame, but generally we support, or especially not, I don't know if I'm going to answer calls from your home anymore, but
it's like, my mom is a Comcast customer. I'll just be like, hey, Dan, call him. But watch him in your bathroom.
But we offer extended tech support for all the devices we support as part of our ecosystem. I think you're spot on in that do-it-for-me solutions and support my devices after they're installed are critical to smart home adoption in the mass market, and that's something that we focus on.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well. The last thing you want is a property manager who has to provide tech support as well. So those of us who are willing to integrate multiple devices onto our platforms, a software platform, are required to provide that requisite support as well. There's really no other way to do it, and we've tried because it's expensive.
That's an expensive, so yeah, there's the integration cost and the support cost. And okay, well, you guys did a great job. Big round of applause for the panel here. Thank you.